Okay, so I want to talk about these Cummins oxygen sensor and NOx codes. So the 10 or the 11 through 13, there was a bulletin, there was a module update and an overlay for the oxygen sensors. A lot of times you'll either get it where it says NOx 1.1 out of range or something like that, or you'll get one that says oxygen sensor slow response or something like that. So the first thing you think of is, oh, let's replace the oxygen sensors. But, just like everything else, there's a gazillion codes that relate to oxygen sensors, but it doesn't actually have to do with the oxygen sensor. There's very few codes that are actually oxygen sensor failure codes. It would be like internal heater failure or something like that. If it says a slow response, it's usually because there's something wrong with the way the engine is running. So here we got the EGR cooler off and the CCV filter. So how this works is it's like a PCV valve, except for when you got a diesel, you get some nasty vapors. So this thing on top here, it's a filter. It makes any of the vapors, it condenses them, and then it gets sucked down there into the turbo. You can see how there's quite a bit of oil on this. For the NOx sensor, which sits down there on the newer ones, it's a 13 and up, I think. The procedure says test it. Is the code active? Yes. Well, then replace it. Usually it's not the sensor that's actually bad, and those are one of those $1,400 and the sensor comes free with the module kind of deals. Aren't you lucky? So usually what happens is the way the EPA made them build these things is that they have to be super sensitive to emissions. And a lot of times what causes this is you get a lot of oil in the turbo. The turbo shoots the oil out into the intercooler and then through the valve, not the valve, the intake, and then back of the engine. So what happens is you end up putting oil vapors or liquid oil into the engine, and that ends up causing different types of soot. And then you get the EGR, which mixes with it, and there are some particles that are in the EGR. It's not completely, totally inert on a diesel. So it's a kind of a perpetual cycle here. So these ones are usually pretty good. If this was a Ford, it would be way different. So this is my procedure here. This is how I do this. First thing I do is I pull out the baro sensor, which sits right on the back of the air horn, and take a look at it. Oops, sideways. And see how it's all set it up. Now what this does is it tells the PCM what the air intake temperature is, and also the barometric sensor takes a snapshot of what the pressure is outside when it starts. The second thing I do is I pull out the oxygen sensors and look to see if they're sooted up. These ones are, they got some soot on them, but it's not that bad. Now what we're looking for here is oily soot. See, I'm not going to touch it because it's nasty, but there's a little, it's not just dry. Usually when it's dry, it kind of just wipes right off. What I'll do is I'll replace the baro sensor, the CCV filter, and blow the oxygen sensors out. That's usually the first step. And then I'll take a hose, attach it to my airline, and I'll blow into the exhaust to see how much soot comes out. And if we get a whole bunch, then that usually indicates possibility of a forced regen. So here's the part number for the baro sensor right there. Now don't take my word for it, you gotta look up, make sure this is part of your application. But so there's the filter, and see how gnarly that is in there, and that goes all the way around, and that separates the liquids and the vapors. And so the next step, if we get return codes, is part of the perform service is to actually do this. But here's the valve, and crack these open. Well, usually the baro sensor is a good indication of what the rest of this looks like, but you can see how there's some buildup in there. It's pretty gnarly. And we got some buildup here. This is not too bad. Like I was saying earlier, if this was a Ford, this will be completely plug solid, but since it's a Dodge, they actually kind of take pretty good care in their design. So, this thing's pretty heavy. There's a bunch of crap in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill up a 5-gallon bucket with hot water and the Chrysler EGR cleaning solution. We're going to soak the cooler and the valve we're going to submerge the valve up to about here, keep the electronics separate, and we're going to let it sit over the weekend. But so this is that's where the baro sensor sits right there. That's where the valve sits, and you can kind of see in there. There's, you know, it's not a lot, but there's quite a bit. And then the CCV filter sits right under there, right underneath this. This is the engine cover. And then we got a few clamps. So it took me about 20 minutes to get this off. The rear two bolts are 15. Those guys right there. What I use is a deep socket and two 1-inch extensions, and it's perfect. Comes right off. You know. So that's it. I mean, that's pretty much what you do if you've done the overlay and you do this stuff, and the codes keep coming back. Then I'm not really sure how to fix it. Even Chrysler doesn't really know how to fix them. It's one of the reasons why I left the dealership, was because I got tired of telling people I don't know how to fix your car, and either does Chrysler, and not getting paid for it, because, you know, it's all warranty, powertrain. So yeah, there we go.